Clemson and Duke. What is going on? And I saw the question all over the internets and TV. Did Clemson lose? Is Clemson in for a drop down because of Dabo?
I think it's interesting. So I think there's a couple different levels here, right? So when people say, are they in for a drop off, or are they, is that dynasty, whatever they had over? They're referencing, especially, I live next door to a Clemson fan. Okay. I don't think people realize this, but Charlotte is a very Clemson city. It's a very South Carolina and a very Clemson city. I live probably 7 minutes from the state of South Carolina, living in South Charlotte. So it's very Clemson forward. And my my neighbor, he tweeted at me and he goes, if only there was like a thing that Dabo could use to, like, I don't know, get wide receivers and like portal them into, the team. But the reality of it is I don't know that Clemson's going to stop recruiting the way they recruit. They've got a lot of guys in that roster. They got a lot of guys that want to play there. They got a lot of, and this is one thing that Clemson has that I don't think a lot of other schools have. They have a lot of parents that want their kids to play at Clemson. And that's very interesting. It's like they combined sort of Alabama and Stanford together to be able to like get parents involved, but also still be cool to kids. And that's something that doesn't happen very often. So I'm looking forward to that. The big thing for me though, two positions. I was talking to my buddy Joshua Perry. Two positions they don't have. They do not have wide receivers. They do not have defensive linemen. And I think the defensive line is going to get better over time. But think about what we've seen out of this team for the last, it's been 15 years since Dabo took over. And they have had dudes at wide receiver, right? Nuke Hopkins, Sammy Watkins. You throw in Mike Williams, and we get to Deion Kane and T. Higgins and even Amari Rodgers. You have guys that can make plays. And then the biggest thing, and I was talking to my buddy, he's a Clemson fan, and he said, Michael Felder, he produces like a couple podcasts, but he finally, like, when we do the show together, he finally like cuts loose. The biggest thing that's hurt Dabo is wasting scholarships. And I'm not calling these kids waste, but what I am saying is I think that he got drunk on the idea of guys like Adam Humphries and Hunter Renfrow being like guys like Jamie Skowski, guys like Nolan Turner, not Jamie Skowski, Nolan Turner. Guys that he thought were like him, because we all know Dabo's backstory, and he used to sleep in the same room as his mom growing up. He was a walk-on. He had to make it work. I think he got drunk on the success of a handful of guys. And he started giving scholarships out to guys that he really identified with instead of pursuing some of these other guys that Alabama was after, some of these guys that Alabama was fighting tooth and nail for, same thing with Georgia, obviously. And so they've got a roster that doesn't have the highest talent level. And again, to go back to my neighbor's comment, they don't hit the portal. They don't do it. They don't use it. They don't do it. And I really thought it was interesting to see, obviously, DJ Uiagalelei's dad. One, it was interesting to watch DJ play because he's got to be thinking immediately like, and y'all thought I was the problem. Yeah. And then to see his dad kind of respond and be like, yeah, that's not, listen, you can preach family, you can preach this, but listen, if the game passes you by, you don't get to have that job anymore. And it's going to be really interesting to see if they attack the portal this upcoming offseason. It's also going to be interesting to see what this season looks like, because if you don't scare people on the edge, defensively in the box or offensively on the edge at wide receiver, then what are you going to do? Every game is going to be a dogfight.
Michael Felder up on ESPN Las Vegas. What surprised you the most about Deion and Colorado over TCU?
Ooh. Man, they were ready to play. And I don't think TCU realized they were in a football game until midway through the second, almost into the third quarter. And they were like, oh, we have to do stuff. And yeah, Colorado's defense is not very good. And Colorado's defense is not very good. TCU had a chance to win that football game, but TCU's defense isn't very good either. And I think they miss a guy like a D. Winters, who was an absolute headhunter, was able to go out there and get things done. Offensively, TCU is still lacking, and they found ways to score points. It's not like they almost scored 50 points themselves. So the reality here is TCU is going to have to go through some growing pains. I think losing Garrett Riley is another interesting part of it here, although he didn't look great at Clemson. So we'll see what happens. But the big thing for me is, as Deion said, those kids believe. And I was watching a Deion video, and it was, listen, I know he does a ton of pub and he does a ton of PR stuff, and he's a self-promoter, but he's a team promoter as well. But I was watching a video where he talked about his parents, his mom and his stepdad never went to his games. He was an All-American. He was an All-State player. His parents never went to his game, so he had to count on himself. And he was an All-State player in baseball, got drafted by the Royals, and there was no one there to he didn't have a draft party when he got picked by the Royals. Like, it was just like, they were like, yeah, well, I got to go to work today. So like, you do your own thing. and he had to start believing in himself. And so he doesn't care what anybody else thinks. He has to believe. He's always had to believe in himself. And even though other people started to believe in him, I think the reality of it here is he's teaching those kids that, listen, all we got is us in this locker room. It's going to be really interesting. On the other hand, man, I don't know what it looks like to play a kid 129 snaps in a game. You can't keep doing that. That's not a thing that can – it's not sustainable. It can't keep happening. So I wonder what this looks like, but they've got some weapons there. They found a way to gel, at least in game one. And remember, it's game one, so I'll put that caveat in there. Game one, they found a way to gel with 87 transfers. So we'll see what this looks like moving forward. They're still small. This is still a small football team on in the trenches, on the line. So we'll see what that looks like because they've got great skill, really great skill players. But at some point, they're going to have to make hay in between the tackles, and that's going to be the interesting part.
Will they beat Nebraska?
Yeah. I think Nebraska is going to have a real hard time scoring over air. Honestly, this is a team that for me, they could practice they could do 100 play practice, and I don't know how many actual touchdowns they score without a defense on the field. Like they are just not, they're not explosive. They don't have like the pieces that you're looking for out there on the edge. And obviously Jeff Sims is a guy that he'll throw the ball to the other team. It's going to be interesting to see what this looks like. So this is going to be I'm excited for this football game, honestly. And when's the last time we could say we're excited for a Colorado-Nebraska game?
Who's the favorite in the ACC now, North Carolina or Florida State?
Florida State, without a doubt. Florida State, number one with a bullet. They beat a top 10 team. I still think LSU is probably a top 10 team. I think LSU is going to give Alabama a run for their money. I think LSU, obviously, they're going to have to play Arkansas, and they're going to have to play I'm going to say Kentucky, A&M. I was thinking of A&M. They're going to have to play them. They're going to have to play these schools, and they're going to have to win those games. It's not going to be easy for LSU, but they can have an opportunity to win those games. I think Florida State hit another gear, and I don't remember who I was talking to, but it might have been Whitfield. But Florida State made LSU quit. And that's the part, to me, that's going to be interesting because Florida State made them quit. I started writing the newsletter. It was 24-17, okay? And I was like, these teams are both pretty good. They're going to be okay. They're flawed. Like, they're pretty even, though. We're okay. And then Florida State said, nah, man, don't put that. Let's put it in gear. And they went and rock and rolled. And they just rolled this team. And that late touchdown, sure, you can give them the late touchdown for LSU. But at the end of the day, we saw one team come out and want to dominate. And we saw another team that thought that something was going to be given to them. And listen, wins aren't given. They are earned.
Michael Felder is with ESPN Las Vegas, Cofield and Company. Sign up for the column, the newsletter he mentioned. It's Felder at Substack.com. Pac-12 out to a 13-0 start.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
I love it, man. I love to see it. I'm actually getting ready to edit some video of Washington from when they started to pour it on Boise State because, man, they looked good. I don't know if there's anybody that's going to be able to stop that team. Penix's healthy, two guys that can catch 1,000 yards of footballs. Like, they're scary. And I love their play design, too, so that's great. You throw in Oregon. Obviously, they had kind of a little cakewalk. Listen, let me circle back because I know you do a lot of Mountain West stuff. Boise State. They've got to be looking around like, what happened?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think their recruiting's dropped off the last 3 years. I'm not a giant Avalos fan, being ready for a job of this level. And let's be honest, Dirk Cutter saved them last year. They were on their way to a rough season, and the former NFL head coach and outstanding college football coach came in and got the job done.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they shake themselves out. But back to the Pac-12. USC still cannot play defense. Nevada had a lot of chances to make bigger plays. We had some drops. We had some overthrows. But USC still does not play great defense. I really, really like what listen, Dante Moore. Folks going to have their hands full with him. It really did remind me of when Deshaun Watson came onto the field against Georgia his freshman year at Clemson. And it was like, oh, this guy's a different animal compared to what we're using right now. Maybe they save him the way that Alabama saved Tua, right? Where Alabama was like, okay, we know what we got. Let's get through this season, and then we'll use him when we need him. But I think Moore is going to be the answer there at UCLA. I really loved what Utah was able to do with their backup and backup quarterback, like two teams that were just like, hey, man, like two guys that were like, we know we're not the guy, but we are going to get the job done. And they got the job done through the air, on the ground, found ways to make things happen. I think Oregon State is another one. And we mentioned DJ Uiagalelei a little bit. That team's fun, man. They're really fun. And the thing that I noticed was the way their defense played against San Jose State while they were on the road compared to what USC did hosting San Jose State. Same opponent, same team, one at home, one on the road. And on the road, they look better than USC's defense. So, I mean, I think they've got a defense that's going to be able to make some plays. I love that for them. Curious to see what we get out of Cal and Stanford, obviously, as we get into a little bit more equal competition. And USC, again, offensively, remarkable. They're so dynamic. Defensively, I still need more from that football team.
The reason I'm going to miss the Pac-12 is kind of set up right in front of us this weekend. They do schedule aggressively non-con, and there are some really good matchups. Yes. And again, a proven ground weekend for the Pac-12. I don't know what it means long-term because it's breaking up, but you mentioned Utah 8 at Baylor. Is that too long?
Oh man, Baylor looked bad, and they lost their quarterback. I think Utah's going to put the paws on them. If we're being honest, man, I really do. I think 8. Listen, if you can get it at 8, if you got it when it was 7.5, like you're in business. I think 8 is good. 8's good because I think they're going to win by probably 14.
Okay,
and that's the reality. Baylor, Dave Aranda's in a bad way, and listen, I don't know what to think about this Baylor team. They're not as big as they used to be up front. They don't run as well side to side as they. I don't know if it's not even a brain drain, a skill drain from losing those guys to the NFL pretty consistently during Aranda's run. But right now, Baylor, for me, they should probably be a double-digit underdog in this football game. So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I especially like the current Pac-12, Big 12 matchups because I really believe over the summer that Brett Yormark and the rest of the Big 12 folks pulled a real scam on a lot of people, and all of a sudden the Big 12, the new Big 12 was better than the existing Pac-12. I'm like, I don't see it. I don't get that. And so we got more of those matchups. Oregon 6.5 at Texas Tech. I mean, obviously Texas Tech couldn't close it out, got upset on the road in Wyoming.
That was a bad football game. Oh my goodness, man. What a bad game. And one team in Wyoming, like Wyoming is one of those things. And this, I don't know if your folks ever said this to you, but my parents always told me don't like, and this is a common maxim, but it's like, don't argue with fools because they'll wrestle you down to their level and beat you with experience. And that's what it looked like for Wyoming. I'm not calling Wyoming fools or idiots. What I'm saying is Wyoming is a team that does not want to move the football. They do not want to play fast. And what they do is make the game so they're basically a team that stands on the field with a hose to make it as muddy as possible. And then get stuck in the mud. And then you wake up and you look around like, what happened to us? And so it's going to be interesting. Texas Tech will be back on their fast track. But Oregon wants to play fast. So that's going to be a really fun football game.
One more in the Pac-12, crossing over against the Big 12. Arizona State, I mean, they had a weather delay. That looked rough. Rashada was pretty good, though, the freshman quarterback.
Yep.
They're hosting Okie State. What do you think of that one?
Man, I don't know what to expect out of Oklahoma State. I'll be honest with you, man. I have no clue. I think Arizona State can and should get a win. Rashada did look good. I think he's obviously I mean, we talked about Dante Moore at UCLA. Rashada's in the same boat, like guys that are growing and learning what they're supposed to do and understanding how they fit into things. So I'm looking forward to watching him play. Oklahoma State, to me, just feels like a team that's kind of cobbled together with pieces. Their best linebacker left. He's now starting at USC. The other pieces that they've had are either in the NFL or they're guys that we still don't know what to expect out of them. So in my mind, I'm looking at Arizona State, and I think that, hey, man, let's make a statement. Let's go out and get a win with another, similar rank, similar caliber FBS team.
Michael Felder's with us. In your newsletter, I got to break up this interview and because I didn't know what was going on here. I know you're very well-rounded. You're going to invest in a sewing machine?
What? I'm debating getting a sewing machine.
Okay, all right.
I really like sewing. It's really therapeutic for me. And listen, you have a kid, and kids, they need to get patches on their knees when they need to get knee patches on their jeans and patches on their pants. And I can't always go to my mom's house to let her sew or to use her sewing machine. And so I'm thinking about imagine if you look right back here and there was a little desk with a sewing machine right back there, right here. Can you imagine that? And I'm like, hey man, I'm sewing stuff and we can make pillows and we can do all this stuff. So yes, that's a reality for me.
I'm jealous as my keister gets bigger. I keep ripping holes in the bottom of my jeans and I'm like, I need someone to sew a patch on here or I'm going to be hanging out at some point. All right, let's close on this one. Mike Felder's with us. The biggest game of the week is Alabama and Texas. Yes. I saw the front page of CBS Sports with a header. How does Texas shock Alabama? It's a 7-point game, and Texas played really well last year. But is there a big gap this year?
I don't know that there's a big gap. I think the biggest problem, honestly, is, and I guess this is, you know what, Cofield, this is the way I would describe it. I think Alabama last year thought they were better than they were. And this year, they know they're not as good. And that's, to me, that's a cornered raccoon, right? That's an animal, a wild animal that you've now put in a corner. And last year they played it very close to the vest, right? They let Bryce make decisions, and Bryce saved them multiple times against Texas, against Auburn. He saved them. He saved them multiple times. They don't have the luxury of having Bryce Young. They don't have the luxury of having Tua. So they have to be, as a team, putting together a full effort. Now, remember, this is a team that lost 3 safeties to the NFL draft. They lost Brian Branch, they lost Jordan Battle, and they lost Helms. They lost Helms, too. So they lost 3 guys. So those guys have to get up to speed. And Alabama, I think they're going to put pressure on Texas in a way that Texas has not experienced. Texas, I think, is walking into this game thinking, we were close a year ago. Let's go ahead and get it now. And Alabama's walking to this game thinking, we're not close to what we were a season ago. So let's go out and rip their heads off early. So this isn't a game, because Alabama does not have a quarterback that you can count on at the end of the game. They don't have a running back that you can count on at any stretch of the game. So they have to go out and attack. And I think they're going to be on the prowl. That's what I'm expecting to see on Saturday.